Comedy and mental health don't seem like natural bedfellows, but there's really good evidence that laughter triggers the release of endorphins in your brain, boosting your mood and your mental well-being. Today, I talked to comedian and mental health ambassador Juliette Burton about the relationship between comedy and mental health and how she's using her stand-up shows to educate the world about mental health. Hi, I'm neuroscientist Dr. Ben Webb, and I want to help you cultivate a healthy brain for a mentally healthy and happy life. Welcome to episode 52 of Better Brain, Better You. Hey, how you doing? So pleased you could join me for today's episode on comedy and mental health with Juliette Burton. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like, subscribe and hit that notification bell to hear when we release new videos. And thanks for listening in wherever you get your podcasts. We release weekly episodes for brains of all ages. But before we get started, I want to give you a free guide on teenage depression. So teenage depression is one of the most common mental health challenges for young people. So I want to give you this guide, our parents' guide to teenage depression. And this free guide will help you to recognise the signs of depression in teenagers, some of the early warning signs of suicidal thoughts, and some effective strategies for supporting a teenager who is dealing with depression. You can get this free guide at ologyonlinecourses.com/depression guide. That's ologyonlinecourses.com/depression guide. That's depression guide, one word. Please do go and grab it. I hope it is helpful. Today I'm talking to award-winning comedian Juliette Burton about her one-woman shows, comedy and mental health. So Juliette is a docu-comedian, speaker, writer, actor, author, presenter and mental health ambassador. Her one-woman comedy shows regularly set out the Edinburgh Festival, and Juliette shares her own experiences of mental illness to support and inspire other people living with their own mental health challenges, and is a mental health ambassador for Rethink Mental Illness. So welcome to the podcast, Juliette.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. And this is exciting. Very happy to be here.
Great. So you grew up on a remote farm in the middle of nowhere. I've read that and heard you talk about it as well. So, and one of the aspects of your comedy shows is you often ask people to define where they come from in 5 words. So could you define where you come from in 5 words? I'm sorry about that. I couldn't resist that question.
No, it's a great question. It's a great question that you've nicked off of one of my shows. No, I love it. I like the cheekiness because no one ever asked me. I asked all these people on all these different shows about define where you're from, define yourself in 5 words, and no one ever asked me. Cool. So where I came from in 5 words, I'd say, you've already said the word remote, so I'd say isolated, very green, rural, and probably, I'm going to say alien because I felt like an alien there, and probably, I know it's not to describe the place. I'll say the place is misfit, as in when I'm there, I feel like I didn't quite fit in. Weird. Well, those are 5 very disconnected words potentially, but yeah, thank you for asking. Great question to kick off.
Were your family into comedy? Was that something? No. Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. And by the way, anyone who's watching, listening to this rather than watching, I just shook my head. So Ben saw me said no. And the other thing is, do look at the video because I look very red faced at the moment, and I'm not embarrassed. It's just that I've just been for a run to look after my mental well-being, and I came back and I hadn't realised that this podcast was going to be filmed as well. So I look quite.
That's my bad. I'm so sorry. But
Oh no, it's my bad for not squeezing in a run earlier. But it's good for the listeners and viewers to be able to see a different version of me. If you come to the shows, I usually will be covered in glitter. Today I'm covered in sweat. But yeah, my family are they no, they weren't into comedy, they weren't into theatre. They're a farming family, and I love them to pieces. But yeah, we I think from a very early age I realised that my life was going to take me in a different direction, and they they they're very very lovely people, but this kind of world is very much not their world. So but that's great because it means I can have my own little world, and I've got a new family, um, an additional family in the comedy world. So there's different comedians that I've become very, very close with, and different audience members as well, and Patreon supporters, and social media followers, and they really have become a life raft, really, of amazing people who I think all identify with the themes that I talk about in my shows, and online and in my writing. And it's not just mental health; it's also the struggle about being a woman, and the struggle about not quite fitting in, or trying to find your authentic voice, and my background, my history of I was bullied when I was a kid, and lots of my mental health struggles meant that I fell out of education, and my life didn't kind of fit the cookie cutter conveyor belt expectations that people had of me. And gradually over the years, I've got these amazing people that I've collected, who are all either fellow comedians who have similar experiences of feeling a bit like outcasts or misfits, or followers or fans who have had similar experiences, and they just feel like they belong in that group. And that's what's so great about comedy, is it is this community of people, and it's a lot like collecting all these people who don't really fit in anywhere else, but actually they all belong together, a bit like the Muppets. Because none of them look uniformly the same, but they all absolutely belong together, and they make sense together. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if it wasn't there in your history, what was your journey to becoming a comedian? So you started out as a journalist.
Yeah, it is. You've got a great research done. Very very impressed already. Um, yeah, so I fell out of education because I was in and out of hospital as a teenager, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. Um, and then I'm in the last hospital that I was in, the last clinic I was in. I sent a letter to a journalist that I'd read an article of, saying I really like writing. What would you recommend? So they recommended a course at the University of the Arts, London, and I studied there. I applied there with no qualifications, no A levels. I think had three GCSEs that I took a year early before I went into hospital for the first time, and they still accepted me because journalism, turns out you just need to be good at writing. So studied journalism, then did a couple of magazine jobs, worked for InStyle, NME, a couple of other newspapers, like local newspapers, then got a job at the BBC, at a local radio station, on a disability scheme. So having mental health conditions was the reason I got to work for the BBC. That then led me to do voiceover work because it was on radio, and I enjoyed using my voice, which led me to do more acting because I couldn't find any journalism work because the recession had hit, the first of the many recessions that we've experienced. Then I couldn't find any journalism work, so I kept doing acting, more and more acting, more and more voiceover work. And then as an actor, I kept getting typecast as like the love interest or the sex interest because I was a woman. And it's, well, I have a voice of my own. So I started writing, and it turned out I loved writing comedy because making people laugh is a great way of making people feel like they belong and help people understand you a bit better. And especially when it came to my mental health conditions, I knew that I so wanted to start writing about and performing about my experiences, because they are so alternative to a lot of people's lives. And I feel passionately that I don't want anyone to feel as alone as I used to feel. So anyone out there who's experienced similar things to me or different things to me, if they come to see my shows and they hear me talking about it from an informed perspective, and they hear everyone laughing about it, then they're like, oh, well, then if she's doing this, then this is okay. I'm not alone. And because I remember feeling so alien and weird, and like I was the problem most of my childhood and most of my teenage years. And if there's one person out there who's seen my shows and has kind of chosen a different pathway, and not so chosen to turn towards recovery rather than towards their illness, then that's really honestly the best thing in the world. And I just want to reach more people so that more people don't feel like alone.
You talk so openly about your mental health. It's incredibly brave and just wonderful to hear, to be honest. And you were so when was your sort of first encounter with mental health services? So you were sectioned for anorexia when you were 17.
That wasn't the first time that I had mental ill health or mental health care. Thank you for saying it's brave. I don't think it's brave, because that implies that there's something to be scared of, and I genuinely think there's nothing to be scared of talking about mental illnesses. And I hope that in the future there'll be less and less shame around it, because there needn't be any shame. It's a part of our brains trying to survive extreme emotional distress. So all of the illnesses that I've been diagnosed with, I now can see it was my brain trying to survive really difficult experiences. So when I was about 8 years old, I started exhibiting symptoms that I now understand were like they were eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, anxiety. But my GP, my family GP at the time, said to my parents maybe she could see a child psychologist, but it was years ago, decades ago, and it wasn't the done thing to do that, so we didn't go down that pathway. So then my conditions kind of morphed, because that's how I imagine them, is that like these symptoms morphed into anorexia, which was diagnosed aged 14. So I was fat as a child, and I was using food in a different way. But then that became an obsession with losing weight, because I was bullied for being fat, and I was weighed and measured every school holidays at the hospital because I was very, very fat. And that just made me go straight into that idea of losing weight is good and gaining weight is bad, which it isn't. And you can be plus size and so awesome and fabulous and at home in your body. But it was part of that really ill societal idea that we were all adhering to back then. Anyway, so diagnosed at age 14 with anorexia. First hospitalization was voluntarily at age 15. Fell out of school. My school invited me not to return because it was one of those. Yeah, it was a private school. Had an amazing education there, but they were like, well, we don't want somebody who's got mental health problems at the school. So they invited me not to return. And I tried to go to different sixth form colleges and stuff, but then during that time, there was around the age of 16. So after the first hospitalization, I got diagnosed with a bunch of labels, and I was put on all sorts of medication. So suddenly it was like, oh, you've got anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar disorder, agoraphobia, not only anorexia, but also all of these. Obsessive compulsive disorder was another one. Just here's all these labels. And I was like, what the hell? I've got no idea who I am. I've got all these names of things that I don't understand, that everyone's acting like I'm some kind of weird freak that I felt like nobody wanted to really fully understand what it was that who I was beneath the labels.
That must have been so overwhelming, having so many different diagnoses at the same time. That must be so overwhelming.
It was a weird year as well. There was a lot going on in the world, like foot and mouth disease for the farming community, and some other stuff going on in my family's world that was just it was a difficult time. But then I was sectioned under the Mental Health Act the following year when I was 17. So I spent my 18th birthday sectioned under the Mental Health Act in hospital, which you're smiling because I hope you're smiling because you've seen a couple of my jokes around that, because honestly, it was a lot of people might spend their 18th birthday drunk under a table in Wetherspoons. I spent mine sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and I think actually I probably had the better venue than a lot of people.
Sorry, I was smiling purely for that because I'd seen that joke. Sorry.
Love that. No, I love it. I think that it's important to just use comedy to break the tension, because it's people's expectations, and trying to subvert their expectations of me. Like, I know I sound like a Tory and I look like a Tory, but I'm not. I don't vote Tory at all. And it's very important to try to subvert expectations and let people know who you are in a different way. Like, I often begin gigs saying things like, "Oh, I'm very privileged to be here," but then I'm privileged in most places. So yeah, the 17 was when I was sectioned. And then when I was 19, I went from a size, I'm trying not to use sizes anymore. I went from being very anorexic to struggling with binge eating disorder. And it was really like a light switch just went off. Like, I suddenly went from every day managing to control my food with restrictive eating to eating at all hours of the day and night, being completely powerless over my ability to stop eating. I would pass out from the pain of eating, and I doubled my body weight in 3 months. And I was suicidal at the time, because again, it's those years of who are you, what's your identity, where are you investing your identity? And for all those years I'd had all these labels of, well, the one thing I knew I was anorexic. I didn't know if I was clever or intelligent, or because I fell out of education, or funny, or I wasn't popular because I was losing friends left, right and centre because they were so scared of what it was I was going through. So I didn't know any of these other things about myself other than, well, I was anorexic. And suddenly I wasn't that anymore. So who the hell was I? And I just felt like a complete failure. So I was very, very suicidal at the time. And then I went into NHS care, which wasn't great at the time. Then I went to another clinic, and then over the course of my early 20s, continued to do therapy that I actually started to engage with. But then I was hospitalised for bulimia in NHS care. And then most recently, this is a long story. I've forgotten the questions, Ben, to be honest. In my more recent years, in about the last 5 to 10 years, I've been diagnosed with some more clear conditions, like complex post-traumatic stress disorder is at the root of all of my other conditions. So I've been diagnosed with 13 different conditions in my lifetime. I had hallucinations when I was when I was sectioned. I experienced psychotic hallucinations, even though I was sectioned for anorexia. The stress of being sectioned and the stress of the way that I was treated when I was sectioned meant that I suddenly had a psychosis, so started audible and visual hallucinations, and that was bizarre and wonderful and incredible, and means that I've met people who have schizophrenia that I can actually talk to in a way of, like, I understand a little bit more about what they go through, although that is a different condition that I've not been diagnosed with. And yeah, there's been, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder is the kind of the root of the tree of the rest of my conditions. I think, like, I wouldn't have developed all of those other conditions if it weren't for the traumatic childhood experiences and multiple traumas. So not just early childhood, but also later on in teenage years and into being sectioned even as well. So lots of, I've started doing trauma therapy with my current therapist, and we've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's really, really changing things. It's uncovering. It's really hard, and it's unpredictable for me. I'm now able to identify when I'm flooded. So when I'm flooded with an emotion that isn't related to the present day scenario that I'm in, but it's all of those old emotions that come flooded back, and I'm starting to be able to say, oh, I recognize that this is something from back then. It isn't now. But it's hard because that doesn't stop the emotions coming, and it doesn't stop the memories from coming. But it does mean that I'm on that journey of hopefully unpacking and identifying it and doing it in a new way. So yeah, it's helping, but it's a lot to take on board, and I wouldn't be able to do it unless I've got a great therapist I've got a really good rapport with, and I really trust them. So it's a partnership, and I've also got amazing friends over the years they've gotten to know me, and I'm able to talk to them about like that this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm handling right now, and it's a lot of hard work. So I'm very lucky to have the people I've got in my life.
I mean, that's something I often talk about and ask people who experience a lot of the mental health challenges that you are, is does having a label actually help? And clearly having so many different labels, as you were growing up, I can imagine just that being so confusing and overwhelming. But so often, trauma is at the root, of many people's mental health struggles, and being able to tackle that and resolve that in a safe environment can be so powerful. And once you, as you say, it's such hard work, but it's a kind of a powerful vehicle for you to start addressing and hopefully helping and resolving some of those struggles when you were younger.
Yeah, I think that labels. So I did a show called Defined that was all about labels, because it was one that I wanted to do after following the breakup of me and my ex-fiance, because that's a label that, we were labeled engaged, and a lot of people are labeled as married or single. And so that show, I began the journey of talking about that label of marital status or dating status, and moving into all these other labels like the mental health labels or the diagnosis labels. I think some people hopefully cottoned on to the fact that we were trying to also talk about other identity labels that perhaps people aren't quite understanding. So the fact that I feel like we're all on a spectrum. Like, it's not just you're either mentally ill or you're mentally well. It's that we've all got mental health, just like we've all got physical health. And somewhere along that spectrum, some days I have a better mental health day, and other days I have less good mental health days. Sometimes you might be diagnosed with a mental illness, and that is a label that helps give you, in some ways, it gives you the language with which you can talk about what it is you're going through. Like I've just been able to explain to you about the complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That's trauma, and that's now given me a better understanding of what it is that I experience. So the feelings, the flooding emotions, that gives me new language that I can make sense of. Something that's nebulous and overwhelming and confusing and can be so easily told, packaged. The narrative we can tell ourselves and we can be told is that, well, you're the weirdo, you're the problem. Like if you're feeling these weird things and it's completely disproportionate, then, well, you're weird, rather than, oh, this is an absolutely natural emotional response to a trauma that you experienced when you were a child that was never resolved, and you didn't deal with it back then because you were a child, so of course you didn't. So this is, yeah. So on one hand, the labels can give you the language with which to talk about an experience that you're going through, or an identity, a thing that you identify and say, no, this is an experience that I have, and it helps you find your tribe sometimes. So I know that my LGBTQAI plus family are one of the best groups of people in the entire world, and so there's a bunch of labels in there of like, well, but they're labels that help you find like some other people that might have been on similar journeys too. So labels can help, but it's when people only see the label, or they misunderstand the label, or they fear the label because they're ignorant. That's when it becomes this kind of roadblock of like there's nowhere, they can't see who you are beyond the label. So I now, at the moment, yes, I've got mental health conditions, but I mean, who doesn't nowadays, right? Most people self-diagnose themselves all the time. But no, I think that for me, it's yes, I've got mental health conditions, but they don't define me. Who I am is because of them, but also in spite of them. There's a lot of me that is completely me, and like I don't think I would have been. I'm going to be very sorry. There's a voice in my head that says I'm about to be very arrogant and telling you the things I like about myself, but that voice, it can just shut up for a second, because I'm a decent person. I'm funny. I'm very caring, and I am intelligent enough to put comedy shows together. And I think those things are partly because of the struggles that I've had with my mental health conditions, because I think you can't, if you have depression, then that usually means that you've probably got a lot of forgiveness and a lot of understanding and a lot of compassion for a lot of other people, because you know what it feels like to be that dark and that isolated. So actually, I think that one of the things we said in one of my shows is that thinking of a label is like you're thinking of one side of a box. And if you pick up that box, it's not just that one two-dimensional surface, like this call that we're on right now. We've only got this two-dimensional hello, but there's a three-dimensional person here. So picking up that box and you've got a label on one side, say like mentally ill, well, then there's also other labels that will give you, like if you turn it around, the three-dimensional cube of the box, you've got all these other sides of these other aspects of that one label. So if you have mental illness, you'll probably be very compassionate, very empathetic, really resilient, really strong, and celebrating all of those things means that we can have a better, more realistic, deeper understanding of mental illness, as well as all the other amazing labels that people can talk about at the moment.
How people label you, absolutely, but also just purely from a kind of, working on your mental health and understanding your mental health. It's just particularly, I think that once you get to the sort of root cause of the trauma, I think it can really help. That's what I was, so I have very similar experiences, and it helped me hugely, like get to that root cause, the origins, and why, and understand where those feelings are actually coming from, and that perhaps lots of them come and are back in your history. So you're, just to step back just a second, so mental health clearly like a huge part of your comedy, and perhaps for people who don't know your work, and when you sort of first think about this, comedy and mental health don't always seem like they would necessarily go together. So, but how has your mental health actually helped you to shape your comedy, and the other way around as well? Has your comedy helped to shape your mental health as well?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people might at first think that, as you say, that comedy and mental health don't go together, but so many comedians that I know have mental health struggles. Because I think Robin Williams is an amazing example of somebody who he was very vocal about that. Like, I'm paraphrasing here, but that to know how sad one can be, like to know the depths of sadness, is the reason why you'd want to dedicate your life to making people laugh. So for me, that's where I feel my most powerful. Is I was talking to my therapist about it yesterday, that I had this gig last week where I tried, it was a brand new set. I think I only had 2 jokes in there that I'd ever tried before, like that weren't brand new. And it went so well, and it was so amazing, because being in a room where you're taking that risk of I'm going to try and communicate something to you with brevity and being very succinct, because comedy and brevity, the shortest jokes are the best, and being able to have as many laughs per minute as possible is also another strength that I didn't ever used to have, but I've worked very hard over the years and I'm still working hard to make sure that I cram as many jokes in as possible. But being able to take that leap of faith of like standing on stage and saying, here's an experience that I've had, and here's a new angle with which I'm trying to package it for you to understand. And then to people laugh, it's a sign of recognition and acceptance and understanding. So as well as that you're making their lives happier and better, and they've got all of the great oxytocin running around in their body, and their endorphins around, and everyone's connected because we're all laughing, and we're all aware of what the butt of the joke is. So I think that how it's affected it is that firstly for the performance side of it, I'm very, because of the trauma actually, I'm very aware of I've got hypervigilance. If you've got trauma as well, then you probably have hypervigilance as well. So I'm constantly aware of if there's someone moving at the back of the room, or they're folding their arms, or somebody's eyeliner's drifting away, or I'm like, everything's going off in my mind, like all of those synapses are just firing off, because of the trauma, because I'm like trying to assess where the next threat might be coming from.
But that's why it's so amazing that, to be honest with you, that you're doing it, because for exactly that reason. I mean, I've gone through his thought process preparing for the interview, thinking, crikey, what would it be like for me to actually do that? It's amazing, just because, for exactly that reason. And that's why I did use the word brave, because it is brave.
Oh no, I love it, because that's the thing, is that actually in that moment, it's like that kind of hypervigilance has a purpose. So I can channel it. It's got a reason to be there. So if I'm on stage and I'm doing that, it's like I'm in charge. I'm harnessing that kind of that psychological framework that I'm naturally prone to exist within. It has a reason to be. So if I'm on stage with a microphone, I can assess the social temperature of the room, and I can involve everyone, and I can make sure that everyone in the room feels included and they're a part of the group, and we're all in this together, and I'm making eye contact with you, and I know that you're going to love this joke, this is for you over there, and you're going to love this one, and then we're going to try and get the whole room involved. And then also like being able to smooth over if anything goes a little bit not wrong, but like I'm not as one expects, and improvising and ad libs, and being able to assess what kind of crowd it is. And so in terms of the performance, I love that. In terms of the way that I dress, like I have a completely different look when I'm on stage to when I'm off stage. And I love that because it's a different armor, it's a different kind of packaging of myself. And then in terms of the writing, so I've got notepads like this one right here, which is a teeny tiny notepad. There's certain things I love about notepads, and this is one of the most perfect ones. I'll explain later, but there's very specific. If I'm having a low time and I'm able to sit and write either on my computer or in notepads, and to find a new angle on what it is I'm going through, or to be able to find a way to explain what it feels like to be inside that experience, that is a way that's packaged through the tension breaking power of comedy, means that there'll be people in the audience that are like, I didn't realize I was learning about depression. I'm just here sitting here with my pint, ready to have a great time. And there might be another act on the bill that's got sex jokes. There might be another act on the bill that's doing fart jokes. But they're sitting there happy because they're laughing, and they came for a good night out, and they happen to understand something a bit more about mental illness during that time. It's also great to deploy it as letting people know that I'm okay, like that deploying it in the middle of a comedy set about something completely different, in a way to let people know that I'm comfortable and confident. This is my truth. This is my experience, and we're going to comfortably and confidently use it to make you laugh from an informed perspective. So early on, I identified, a friend of mine, Bernard, helped me identify. I was being asked a lot in interviews about offense, like of causing offense, because so I think offense is different to harm. I think if you're harming somebody, that's a problem with your comedy. If so, I've seen other people. There are a couple of comedians I've seen who've spoken about their mental, well, specifically eating disorders, and they've given hints and tips in their sets that have left, hints, the negative hints and tips, like that have left me feeling trapped with my eating disorders in my head and very, very harmed. Like triggered is a horrible overused word, and I think that it's being used a lot like other words like woke and gaslighting. We're being gaslit about what the word gaslighting means. Like we're not using it. I think there's some people who are using it in a different way to try to undermine what the experience of it is. So triggered is another word that I think it is a mental health language. It's a word that means something in the mental health world. So to mean that it triggers an illness response. So it unleashes something, that it calls to your illness out. So this particular person I'm thinking of, who I won't name, but was giving some hints and tips, it was calling out to my anorexia, and I was sitting there just thinking, I need to get out of this room. I'm trapped here. My illness is raising its monstrous head. I don't want to do that in my comedy. So I make sure that everything that I say is from an informed perspective. is I'm willing to be held accountable. So if somebody sat down and said, this joke, let's analyze it specifically. Who's the butt of the joke? Why is it okay for you to say that? Are you harming anybody in that joke? And over the years, actually, that's meant that I think when I was early on, I didn't do that as half as much as I do now. So I'm now nowadays much more confident and happy to stand by every single joke in my set. I'm proud and confident and aware who the butt of the joke is. Do they deserve to be the butt of the joke, or does the concept, it doesn't have to be a person, it could be a concept or my illness, or it could be anything. Yes, that they are okay to be the butt of the joke. So informed, accountable, and what's your intention? What's most importantly, what is the intention behind the joke? So is your intention to belittle and hurt the butt of the joke, whoever they are or whatever they are, or is your intention to inform the audience about something? And is there a dose of levity? Does it balance out? And it's just this wonderful kind of alchemy of all these things that come together. I feel my most powerful on stage, and I feel my most understood on stage. And I've missed it so much. It's my purpose and my reason, and I'm so excited to be back on stage soon.
And and how has it helped you yourself? So, I mean, I keep saying the word brave, but it's just when I think about it, it's just because of so when you're delivering comedy, a big part of comedy, and I'm not an expert, of course, but I can imagine, I've been to many comedy shows, is the moment and when people don't when people don't laugh. When people don't fight, when you have a set that doesn't go down as well as you hoped, or isn't delivered as well as you hope. So I'm just thinking completely, from my perspective, from me, that just triggers shame and all of that stuff or whatever, and I'll probably never come back again. So that's why I use the word brave. So how has it helped you? How has it helped you with your own mental health?
I think it's a great question. I think that in the early stage of my career, it helped me have a voice. It helped me gain confidence, and it helped me realize and recognize that people wanted to talk about this or listen about this and understand. But over the years, I've worked harder to get funnier. So there's a few people. If anyone who's listening has ever seen me in my early stage career, I've worked very hard to make sure that I'm much funnier than I was back then.
You are very funny.
Thank you, but honestly, back then I was still learning the gears, like learning how to.
Yeah, of course, you're learning your trade.
Yeah, and also I think that a lot of people had a lot of opportunities because of the mental health story and the fact that people there was an appetite for it. And I think I was trying to focus more on storytelling rather than the jokes. So the jokes weren't massively surprising, but I think that they were pushing forward progressive conversation. The shows that I was doing were a part of progressive conversation. Nowadays, I'm much more aware of that. I want to still be a part of the progressive conversation, but I want it to be so funny, like hilarious, and keep pushing myself to get funnier and funnier and funnier. So that because if it's funny, if the funnier it is, the more clever, like the more I can sneak in. A joke is always the truth wrapped in a lie. That was my one of my mentors told me that, and I was like, that's exactly it. So I can package harder hitting truths if the construct of the joke is hilarious, and it's this wonderful sugarcoating of something that's very strong. You can change somebody's perspective with an amazing joke, or you can just make them laugh. And yeah, I think in terms of helping me recently, it's as simple as that. It can be as simple as I'm having a really terrible day with my depression or my body dysmorphic disorder. Getting on stage is a way of giving two fingers up to those people, those conditions, or giving it the finger and saying, you're not going to stop me, you're not going to define me, I'm going to get on stage and still do this. And yeah, there have been times when it hasn't gone as well as I'd hoped it would. Of course there has been, but it's also taught me a lot, like with running, how resilient I am, because I can have a run. I went for a run today, and it was a lovely run. But even then, it's important to remember the runs that were horrible to do, because I'm still a runner. I'm still running. So similarly with comedy, I remember those gigs where it didn't go very well. it didn't stop me from getting back up on stage and doing it again. You're only as good as your last gig. That's perhaps an unhelpful sometimes, depending on when you say that phrase, but it is. There's always the next gig. There's always the next opportunity. And I mean, up until this last year where we've not been able to gig as much, usually there's always another chance to reinvent yourself. And that's what I love so much about comedy, is any time I get on stage, it's a brand new group of people. Even if it's exactly the same people who've been to other shows, it's a new combination in a new room, in a new way that they're all sitting. It's a new me. I've certainly between gigs, I've always, something's happened to change my perspective. So there's the news. You've got to be aware of the news in case, even though I don't do a lot of massively satirical or newsy stuff or political stuff. Actually, I am very political, but I wrap it up in a lie, you see. But it helps me. It's helped giving me my power. It's empowered me. I felt so disempowered because of my illnesses, because of my experiences in the past. Being able to get up on stage and have this like killer set that I know is going to really, it's given me the best chance to be as powerful and as strong as I can be. Then it's a way of me reinventing who I am to myself in this world with this group of people every time. And I love it. It's a constant gift.
Wow. Amazing. And how have people reacted to your openness about your mental health?
Generally, or do you mean in the comedy world?
So I'm thinking in the comedy world first and foremost, but more broadly as well, you know, the horrible place that can be social media and, you know, the broader world out there.
Yeah. Or just dating. Yeah. So I mean, that's where my mind went. I think that with comedy, as long as you're making people laugh, people accept it. I think that I went through a phase where I wasn't making people laugh as much about it. I think I was slightly focused on wanting to tell the emotional story rather than tell the emotional story as well as make people laugh. And now I've found ways of telling the emotional story as I'm smiling because it's new. There's a bit in a new set that I've been doing recently that it does tell that like some of the darkest stuff, but it's wrapped in something that it's just it's so much fun to perform. Please come to a show soon so you can see it. I think that on stage in comedy, as long as you're making people laugh, people are very accepting. It breaks down barriers. If people are laughing, it increases understanding. It means that people accept who I am and what I've been through because they see the funny before they see the label. But I think in comedy as well, there has been certain times where people have sort of packaged me as a mental health comedian, and I'm like, hang on, no, that's not a genre of comedy. Like it's either you're funny or you're not. It's a bit like it's the frustration of being called a female comedian, as if it's my genitals that are getting the laughs. They're not. I think they're hilarious, but other people disagree. So I've tried to. I think in comedy I feel the most free. In real world stuff, honestly, I've tried to be really open because I think that if anybody has an issue with my mental health conditions or my mental health history, then that says more about them than it does about me. And that we're not going to move forward to a more progressive society, a more inclusive society, where people are more able to feel less alone, unless people like myself we need to bear the brunt of the ignorance. We need to go out there and call out the ignorance and be like, no, this is who I am and this is what I've been through, and why should I not talk about this? This is only going to help people to understand not only me but understand other people, understand themselves better. There are a lot of people I know who have undiagnosed conditions, and that leads to the ripple effect of them affecting other people in their life negatively, and causing a lot of harm. So I think it's important that we move towards this era where we can hopefully be not only accepting, but also more understanding of everybody's mental well-being. And I remember when I was first diagnosed that people called me attention seeking. People said things like, why are you doing this to your mother? As if I had purposefully wanted to hurt specifically my mother. Like, I love my mother. She's my hero, my angel. Like, I think she's incredible. But I'm not, it impacted all that shame and guilt that you've spoken about, that society had this horrible idea of that I had some kind of power over this, and over the illnesses. And at the time I didn't, because I was ill. I was powerless with my illness. And nowadays my illnesses, I've realized they're not there. I'm not trying to get power over them. I need to listen to them and learn from them. So because they're trying to protect me from those deeper traumas or from perceived threats that aren't there. The other place, dating, that we mentioned, dating and also workplaces. Like I love the comedy world because my mental health conditions they're not going to inhibit me in comedy. They're good things. But when I used to work in offices, I very much felt like there was misunderstanding and discrimination, and there still is out there. And with dating, again, just reminds me just how much ignorance there is, because I'll meet lovely guys, and it's certainly a way to sort out the good ones from the less good
ones. I'm sure, yeah.
I've been sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and I've had to listen. Do you want my number? And actually, I've done that. Actually, once there was a guy trying to chat me up. Where I was like, I'm just not interested. In a bar, and I was just like, I don't think you want my number, and here's why. And it was actually a really great way to just. He didn't ask my number after that, so I was like, fair enough. Just man eater, really. I have got eating disorders, and man eater is one of them. So.
Is one of them. Wow. So I mean, what I'm hearing as well is that, so you're an educator. It says kind of language has sort of been there throughout your sort of, you obviously clearly like language. You love writing. It's, you're previously a journalist, big part of who you are, and you're in a sophisticated way wrapping up these messages in comedy. It's amazing. So you're an educator as well as a comedian.
Oh no, I love it. I'm just kind of trying to let that compliment, because it's a huge compliment to say that I'm an educator, because I think.
Well, you are. It's amazing, because it's a hard thing to. It's not just a hard thing to talk about, is it? I mean, it's a hard thing to communicate, I think, to people, because people have their own biases coming into the situation, and so many different barriers to them understanding and learning. And this is what I loved about you. Comedy is clearly such a it's a great vehicle for educating people.
Well, I've always been fascinated by communication. Like I do love writing. I've always loved writing, but I just think it's amazing that we've got so many. Like I've only got my experience on the world, on life, on what it means to be human, what it means to be in this specific body, and I want to understand what other people's experiences are, and I also want people to understand my experience. So, how on earth do we tell those stories? How on earth can we tell those stories and we weave our magic to be able to not only give information, but also make people feel and think and kind of steer them in the way that it sounds manipulative, but it means I feel like I'm looking for connection rather than manipulation. So trying to let people know what it is that I'm trying to get them to understand about me, and therefore hopefully understand about themselves. I'm also very interested in researching with my shows as well. Like I love listening to other people's stories afterwards in bars when I'm on tour, meeting these amazing people who want to come and chat, share their stories. And the number of people who have such similar stories, but they're in such slightly different ways. And I'm like, oh, this person that I met in Australia when I was on tour out there is just like this person that I met in Birmingham. And they've had exactly, like, if they met, they'd be like best friends, and they just know each other so well. So yeah, it's having this amazing group of like the Muppets, kind of creating all of these incredible people that connect with each other.
But going back to the comedy, what were some of your favourite comedy gigs?
I mean, at the moment, honestly, the most recent one is my favourite, because it's the most recent, and I took so many risks in it, and it's just a new material night in a pub. The best shows are the ones where you'll see somebody in the crowd, and they're like, it's changed them. And the last gig that I did last week, I took so many risks with this new material, and it all paid off, and it's just given me that kind of new energy, that new kind of lease of life of like, keep going. This is exactly the right place for me. I'm never going to give up. This is exactly what I need to do with my life. There's nothing else for me. I love this. This is this is exactly where I belong.
So where can we see your latest shows?
I've got some new material nights that I'm doing in London at the moment, that are like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And people, if you can come, you'd be very, very welcome. I've also got some so hour-long shows that are going to be at the Museum of Comedy. It's being filmed on the 22nd of July in London and Holborn, which is easy to get to if you are up for travelling. Guildford Fringe, Bedford Fringe. And then later on in this year, we're going to be doing more touring shows in the autumn. And then next year, hopefully, if we can get the funding, I'll be doing another slightly bigger tour. And we have just found out that we've got funding for research and development of a brand new show. So next year, so many shows I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing them with more power and more laughter and more research. If people want to find out more, my website is julietteburton.co.uk, and there's a whole page with show details on there. Juliette spelled with two T's and an E, and Burton's spelled like Richard Burton or the menswear shop, depending on your references.
We'll link to it in the podcast notes. So
please do. And yeah, social media as well. Come and find me on social media and ask me where and when you can see me, because that would be great. Or you can watch me on Next Up as well, but they are old shows. Next Up Comedy is amazing, but they are old shows, and I've gotten a lot funnier since then.
So you mentioned running. So that's one of mine for sure. I love running, and like out there three times a week when I can be, to certainly helps with my mental health. Is that one of your outlets? Does that help you?
Definitely. I'm hypermobile, so all of my joints are double jointed, like every single one of them. So I was always told don't do high impact sports, and I've got, like, I'm very bendy and wobbly, and I'm not a natural runner. I look really weird when I'm running. I don't care at all. I was about to swear, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't. I don't care what I look like when I'm running, because I feel powerful. I love running, because it gives me purpose. It's how it makes me feel. I feel powerful. I feel stronger. I feel more resilient. It gives me time on my own to let go of all of this. If I'm feeling angry, I can take it out on the pavement. If I'm feeling sad, then it just gives me time alone to try to turn that around. I love it. So yeah, for sure, running, especially I've only been doing it for 2 years. I'm not a fast runner. I love long distance running because it just gives me longer on my own. And it's my own peace of mind, and gives me some sort of form of achievement. And it also, I run regular charity runs, so it gives me another way to feel like I'm contributing to the world better by raising money through charity runs. So yeah, running. Would you like me to tell you the other things that help me with my mental well-being?
Yes, please.
Well, I've been on medication in the past. I'm not currently on any medication, but medication can and has helped a lot. Used at the right time with the right GP helping guide me through the dosage and how it will affect me. But at the moment, I'm not on any. At the moment, I'm learning a lot about self-care. Like I thought self-care was bubble baths, which I hate bubble baths. I think they're awful. I thought that was, oh, but what I'm sitting in a stew made of my own dead skin. Why is this? And the water's getting cold, and I feel like I'm drowning. Like, I know it's not nice. It's horrible. So I like feeling warm, which is, again, like, if I'm running, I'm only going to get warmer during the run, so that's good. So I realised that self-care wasn't bubble baths and candles. It was more like identifying what makes me feel powerful. Sometimes self-care is dedicating some time to doing my taxes, or tidying up. So making sure that I do those little those little things that are what's the word? They're like they're not big, huge self-care treats. They're little maintenance self-care. I love being out with dogs, so I dog sit and dog walk. I did it during the pandemic to try to pay some bills, but as things start up again, and hopefully I get my career properly moving again, I think I'll still try to offer some time, because dogs help so much. Animals generally help incredibly, and I think I'm hoping that the world will do more research into proving that animals have a great role to play in mental well-being for us. Seeing friends, talking to friends, being with friends physically, being able to that social temperature, that's a hypervigilance thing. When you're with friends, you're able to connect in a way that doesn't need language. It's non-verbal communication. And getting out there to see other comedians, to laugh, to be around those people that will make me laugh is really important as well. I also love reading, but I haven't been reading very much recently. I've been finding it hard to sit with my thoughts. So finding time identifying what it is that gives you that feeling of empowerment or peace, or if, like, I've identified that warmth is something that I really need, so I need to dress warmly so that will help me not get stressed and anxious and tense, and it does actually impact my mental well-being, because I'll feel more anxious if I'm cold. And regular, so nutrition is a big thing for me as well. So eating regularly, eating every 4 hours, making sure I have a varied diet. Learning about nutrition over the years has really helped me underpin my ongoing journey of recovery with my eating disorders, because they are always going to be there and they're always going to be whispering. But if I stay physically active, running, cycling, feeling that freedom physically, I need to fuel my body to be able to do those things. And also I need to fuel my body to get up on stage and do the thing I love most. The opposite of depression isn't happiness. The opposite of depression is purpose. So I need to fuel my body. To fuel my body to make sure that I can achieve my purposes.
Wow. Amazing advice. That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So, no, thank you so much for talking to me today, Juliette. It's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. And thank you so much.
Really lovely to talk to you too. Thank you so much for having me.
So thanks so much to Juliette for talking to me today. I really enjoyed our discussion about comedy and mental health. And if you want to watch one of Juliette's shows, you can catch her on the 6th of August at London Gateshead Festival, or at the London Museum of Comedy on the 7th of October. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.